when we're presenting. There will be opportunities to unmute yourselves when we're having discussions and polls, and you'll be invited to speak at those points. As I just mentioned, there'll be polls and discussions, so it is interactive and you are encouraged to take part and participate in those. So just an overview of the session, we're going to have a look at the impact of COVID-19 lockdown on young people and on youth work. We're going to cover digital youth work, general wellbeing, safety and safeguarding. We'll also have discussions and polls around these topics and subjects. And then we're going to get you to think about the support that's available to you. There'll be an opportunity for a Q&A at the end and any further discussion as required. Okay, so the National Youth Agency. So the NYA is the national body for youth work in England. And as you can see, we're here today with you. So we do work internationally as well with other youth work agencies across the world. So we believe that young people deserve a productive, fulfilling future. And our mission is to transform the lives of young people in England and beyond through the power of youth work. The NYA also influences and informs government policy for young people here in the UK. So I'm aware that it isn't just youth workers from Grenada that are attending this webinar. There are people from other Caribbean islands as well. So just wanted to acknowledge that. In terms of the National Youth Policy, so this is in development and is under review, but this is about making youth work professional. So it's about the development and the implementation of a code of practice and ethics for youth workers, ongoing leadership development for youth leaders, and then support for the professional development of youth workers. I'm going to hand over to Lydia to introduce the poll.
Hi everyone, I hope you can hear my voice. If you can't, then do message in the chat. So this is the first interactive bit of the session. A poll should appear on the screen and you will have options to say how has COVID-19 affected you, so you should be able to see it now. So how has it affected your practice and youth services in Grenada, but that also goes for other countries in the Caribbean as well, where you guys might be from. So please vote. It is multiple choice, so you can choose multiple options. And once we have everyone that's voted, we will share the results with you on screen as well. Made that the cut-off point. So here are the results. Hopefully you can see them on the screen. So 94% of you said that you've had cancelled sessions and activities. Very much the same over here and probably the rest of the world, to be honest with you. The closure of schools, an increase in digital youth work, which we will talk about in a second. Closure of youth services, not working normal hours, working from home. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that everyone's really experienced. So you're going to stop sharing those results now. And if Laura, if has anyone typed anything in the chat, let me just check. I don't think so, because everyone sort of had similar experiences. So before COVID-19, you probably had a range of youth work going on in your countries. So you probably had outreach, you probably had detached, so people walking around on the streets talking to young people. You probably had targeted, so you had sessions going on within youth centres for a particular topic. You might have had counselling, so working with young people on one-to-one basis. But now it's changed quite a lot since then. So now it might look more like this. So you have physical distancing in place. There might be places now opening up, because I know that the cases in Grenada, I'm not sure about other Caribbean islands, but it wasn't as bad as in the UK, where cases have sort of shot up, dipped, and are now increasing again. So you might have more going on there than you do have here. But yeah, it might look a bit like that. So again, because we'd like you to adapt this to your situation, this is what's happening in England. and other parts of the UK. So people are starting to plan face-to-face sessions, but this is very much in a physical distancing way, and usually in outdoor spaces, so in green spaces or parks, just so that one, you can physically distance, but also because of going in enclosed spaces that need to be cleaned. It isn't really happening at the moment as much. You would need to limit group sizes in the UK. I'm not sure if it's the same over there. So we're limiting to bubbles of 15 people, and those 15 people have to be the same people that meet up after each session. So it's a bit different. And then I know that Grenada have had curfews over lockdown. So that could also change how you go into face-to-face delivery if those curfews are enforced again. So future delivery wise, we're also looking at things like hand sanitizer, cleaning buildings, making sure that we can still physically distance if we are doing indoor sessions, and having different sorts of PPE, so masks and gloves and stuff like that too. However, I have been delivering, and a lot of other youth workers have been delivering digital youth work methods. So even things like Zoom calls we've been doing, but also on social media to send out activities to young people that they can do at home.
So I am now going to introduce our first discussion. So this is about sharing your personal experiences, particularly within COVID. And we're going to split you into breakout rooms to be able to have those discussions. So you'll be together with a group in the breakout room, and you're going to talk about this. So in your groups, what we'd like you to do is give an example of your most challenging experience as a youth worker. We want you to think about what you learned from this and how can these skills be used during COVID restrictions to support your work with young people. We're going to give you a minute just to reflect and think about what example you want to talk about in the group. But when we come back from the breakout room, we're going to feed back, and we're going to ask each group to feed back a brief summary of what they spoke about. So any second, you're going to be asked to join a breakout room. Hi everyone, welcome back. I think people are slowly coming back from the breakout rooms. I think everyone's back now. What I'd like to do is I'd like to invite a nominated person from each group just to feed back, just a brief summary of what you discussed in your group. So could group one, someone from group one feedback, please? Okay, so either people don't know they were in group one, or it would have been breakout room one. Okay, let's move on to breakout room two. Could somebody from that group feedback, please?
I'm not in Brigade Group 2, but in my group, I don't think we knew which group we were in, so that may be the case for the other groups as well.
Okay, that's really useful. Thank you for that information. Stephen, do you know who was in group one? Could you give me a couple of names?
Yeah, the list is in the Teams chat.
Ah. I don't seem to have that. Lydia, have you got the names?
Yeah, sure thing.
Thank you.
So breakout room one was Claudine, Danny, Shanta, Sharama and Udi. So who was the nominated person in that breakout room? Or a lovely volunteer from that room, please. Okay, don't worry if you don't feel confident in talking, but you can always type it into the chat if you don't feel confident in talking to the group. So I'm going to go on to room 2. So that was Ava, Belinda, Nada, Lorraine, Celicia and Sarah. So is there anyone in that group that would like to speak? Or you can type into the chat as well if you want to feedback there instead. Okay, I'm going to go on to room 3. So
Okay, hi, good morning.
Oh, hello, Paisley.
I guess other persons are a bit shy, so I'll just get to it.
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
All right, so my colleagues and I discussed that some of the challenges that would have existed with regards to accessing different persons, such as the youths, when you want to engage in different activities or programs. Due to COVID-19, you wouldn't be able to do the face-to-face contact and that sort of stuff. And as a result of that, using the different mediums such as Zoom, Skype in some cases, and all these other platforms were what we would have had to do in order to reach these persons. However, on the flip side of that is that we acknowledge that there might be cases where some of these young people don't have access to such platforms due to the fact that they don't have internet access, and some persons might not have devices to use to access those platforms. So as a result of that, you have to take all these things into consideration and see how it is that you can address that. Additionally, we acknowledge that some of these young persons might not have a very long attention span. So by conducting all these different meetings, we might think it's really good, but persons zone out in the first 5-10 minutes. So finding different creative means and ways of engaging young people to ensure that they pay attention, stay focused, and can actually benefit from these different sessions that you would want to have via these online platforms. So some of these things we took into consideration and would then have to adjust and readjust as this whole pandemic continues to impact our ability to have different sessions with young people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's a really valuable contribution actually to consider that young people don't want to engage with us for long periods of time using digital youth work, and we have to really think about what they have access to and what's going to be most appropriate. Thank you for speaking up. Would somebody from breakout room 4, I've got the list now, so that would be,
okay, good morning.
Morning.
So for group 4, different persons shared that the COVID-19 situation have affected their ability to work, to do the work that they used to do, the way they used to do it, but not much specifics were given in line of how exactly it is affecting them. One person mentioned that they have to work longer hours, but they're still doing face-to-face work, not online work as much. For my case, I work with teens, young adults who have disabilities. And when the COVID-19 situation came in, we were right in the middle of job training, having them work in different businesses. And we decided they only had a week to go. So even though the schools had shut down and everything, we decided to let them continue with the final week, which they did, and everything was fine. But they were supposed to do a month of on-the-job training in May. So that has been completely canceled, and we may not get to go back to that until sometime next year, 2021. Unfortunately, one of the sad part for me is that some of our students were completing this year. They finished this year, and so they would not be able to return to come back next year. And so I remember one of the businesses had offered to one of the business in the tourism sector had offered to employ one of our students. But with COVID-19, they had no guests at the hotel. The whole hotel was shut down. So that unfortunately, was an opportunity that my student was not able to get a job and has up to this time is still unemployed. So it has really affected our ability to work with youths and young adults who have disabilities in the area of employment.
Yeah, I think when we work on projects that have a time limit, this has obviously happened at a period when things would have come to a natural end and you haven't been able to end it in the way you wanted. And that can be difficult, obviously, for the young person, but as the worker, we have to manage those endings for ourselves as well. And that can be challenging. And any period of change is always difficult. So we're not just managing the situation for the young people, we're having to manage it for ourselves as well. So it has been a very difficult time. Would anyone from Breakout Room 5 like to share what they discussed?
Okay, good morning. I'm Jessa from Grenada. I'm representing Group 5. There were 4 of us in the group, and 1 from the Bahamas and the other 3 ladies from Grenada. However, we can join the same sentiments with the other groups in that COVID had landed us at the area whereby what we are accustomed to doing in terms of working face-to-face and within the same physical space with our young people, we were not able to continue doing that during COVID. The lessons that were learned is that technology, most persons were not technology savvy, and it is the youth as well as some of our workers, because you now have to utilize the internet and the various platforms, be it Zoom or Skype rooms or Facebook sessions. But even if our young people have devices, they use it for other purposes, and we were not prepared for that mechanism. So a lot of that engagement sessions was not able to take place as was expected or to the maximum that was needed. Lessons learned is that we need to enhance ourselves, which is our young people as well as the youth worker, in being more technologically experienced and being able to utilize that means as it can be very useful and beneficial. What is interesting though, and that's from a personal standpoint, with Zoom being the leading platform, it now helps the youth worker to realize that learning via technology or virtual means can even be meaningful and useful, also engaging with our young people, because we ourselves are exposed to that means through these very sessions that we are doing now, in that we can still continue to go into the discussion rooms, into the breakup rooms, and engage ourselves and share our experiences and our inputs, apart from just listening to be lectured. So all these are skills and techniques that we ourselves need to embrace and to have a wider knowledge on, so that we can engage our young persons with it in the midst of that pandemic. So that's for Group 5.
Thank you. I think it's interesting you said it's something we have to embrace, because I think not everyone was as keen to be as digitally informed as we perhaps are now. But it has shown that it does have its uses and it can have a positive impact on our work. And at times when we can't be face-to-face with young people, it is a lifeline for some. But we do recognise that it does have its limits. So thank you for sharing. Okay, we're going to move on.
Can I just say, Laura, we've got a comment from Group 1 actually in the chat.
Okay.
So I'm just going to read out the comment. So they've said the major challenge for us is not being technologically savvy as a youth worker. So some of the points that Jessa was just saying as well. We've learned as youth workers we need to be trained in computer science and the use of different applications. All in all, we came to the realisation that we need to go back to basics, which has been put in capitals, and reassess how youth work is done in the Caribbean, which I think is a really good point and definitely parallels some of the stuff that other people have been saying. So thank you for that.
And I think that would actually echo a lot of the experiences from youth workers in England as well, going back to basics, having to learn new technologies and upskill themselves. And it has been a realization that we have to change the way we work sometimes, and that's okay. Okay, so we're going to move on.
So we have just been having reflections about digital youth work, and I have also been delivering digital youth work. I've had to change from meeting young people face to face or putting on events, and yeah, all sort of digital events or digital conferences. And these are just some of my top tips if you're planning to do stuff, or if you've been doing stuff. These are the type of things that I've been doing. So I think Kesley sort of said earlier, people tend to zone out after like maybe 5 or 10 minutes on a video call, which is very true. So I try and keep my calls to 45 minutes long to try and avoid this. I try and think about my age ranges and how to group people appropriately for safeguarding purposes. Also for safeguarding purposes, having someone else on a call, especially with young people. Thinking about privacy settings, so you might have noticed in this Zoom call, you can't privately message people and you can't screen share. Making sure that you're sharing appropriate files with people on the call, and also planning breaks for yourself as a practitioner, because if you're on Zoom calls all day, it really does drain you out. So just taking care of yourself as well. So this is just general tips, but sometimes we do forget about, as youth workers, to look after ourselves as well as young people. So just thinking about your own well-being, taking breaks appropriately, making sure that you're eating and drinking at proper times, and just, yeah, having time for yourself, working towards your own goals, because during COVID-19, especially in lockdown, I think you forget about your own personal goals and what you want to achieve. So just giving that time for yourself is really, really good for you.
Apologies, it took me a second to unmute then. So I'm just going to take you through safety and safeguarding and some things that we all need to consider when we're working with young people. So having an up-to-date risk assessment of the work we're going to carry out. So that's about identifying the hazard and then assessing who's at risk and how significant the risk is and what we're going to do about it. Your organisation will undoubtedly have its own template, but it might be worth revisiting those risk assessments in the current climate where things have changed, things are different, and included in the risk assessment how the young people are going to present as well and their specific issues, because young people's issues would have changed. So it's worth considering those within the risk assessments. In terms of having consent and emergency contact details, often when we meet face to face with young people, that's quite a natural thing to get consent, have all the details in case of an emergency. But it's also important that if we're going to carry out digital youth work, that we also have access to that information and those details. And then communication with the team, so letting your line manager know what you have planned and what's going to be going on. Also having debriefs and pre-brief sessions with your team, so you can plan your work and talk about what you're going to deliver and how things are going to go in the session with young people. And then also an opportunity to talk about it afterwards. So if there were any issues that came up, or if it was a particularly difficult session, and at the moment we know things are very challenging, so it's important to be able to have time with your colleagues to discuss what those issues are and reflect on how the session's been and how working with young people in these circumstances has been. Knowing the safeguarding procedure, so if you get a disclosure or an issue of concern, you need access to the documents you need to complete, and it's important that you know who to contact to help, so issues aren't left, so that they're dealt with in a timely fashion. And then emergency procedures. So if you're using a building, for instance, knowing what the fire procedures are, knowing where the emergency exits are, and also having an emergency procedure, even if you're doing digital youth work, going back to having the emergency contact details and having access to call emergency services if needed. And then an opportunity to practice that as well. So if you're in a centre or a building, having an opportunity to practice those emergency procedures, not just with your team, but also with the young people you're working with. Okay, so we've now got a scenario for you. We will put you into the breakout rooms once again, and you'll be in the same breakout room as you were in before. So again, it's an opportunity to have a discussion and talk together to see how you would respond to this. So the scenario is, you meet a young person who is really struggling with the restrictions around COVID-19. They feel more isolated and have started to engage in risky behaviours. What actions will you take as a youth worker? So you'll be invited to join the breakout rooms, and the scenario will be posted into the chat or broadcast, so you will have access to it.
Of such behavior, and what the actions, not what actions, what the behavior, the risky behavior can lead to. Also, we can come up together with courses of actions that can help cope with or mitigate those risky behaviors. And lastly, if we are not able to help based on that person's situation, we can refer them to the right person or an organization that can be able to help them.
Yeah, some great points again, and probably paralleling with other groups as well. All sort of almost like the basics of safeguarding as well. But it's really good to sort of go back to basics a lot, and really hone down what youth workers are good at and why we do youth work. So yeah, some lovely points again. Thank you for that, Salisha. So breakout room 4 was Giselle, Lindona, apologies if that's wrong, Rashir, Shanta, Shira, and Tanisha. Apologies again, the name pronunciation.
Okay, hi, good morning. Reporting for group 4. From our discussion, we also thought it would be important for us to assess the situation, because when you think about risky behavior, you just don't know what to expect. So you need to be very careful engaging that person up front. We thought that it was important for us to get a sense as to really what is the problem. So we need to understand the cause of why the person is behaving the way they are behaving. And once we can figure out the cause, it may be something that we can help with initially. So maybe it may be needs that the person may have, like somebody was saying, to be basic things like water, maybe even a telephone call to get access to somebody that he might have missed for a while. These little basic things, if we can provide those, then we will. But we would also seek assistance if the needs are beyond us. So we may have to outsource or refer the person to a trained person, like a psychologist or maybe a counselor or something, somebody who would be able to provide more professional needs based on what we identify from the exploration. Someone also suggested that we may want to start right away building self-esteem in the young person, because we think once that person's self-esteem is developed, chances are they are better able to cope with the challenges of the COVID-19. So in a nutshell, that is where we were at. The root cause we think is absolutely important, and if we can't, we would refer for professional help.
That's brilliant, thank you. And I think something that you highlighted, or that I highlighted from what you were saying, was actually thinking about those basic needs. Like I think at times young people can get quite angry and lash out, and there could be a huge sort of conversation or monologue about why they're angry, but then actually it comes down to the fact that they're hungry, or actually they need a drink, or like you said, they might want a phone call, they haven't spoken to someone in ages and they've lost their phone and they're getting very frustrated that they don't have a means of communication. So that's something that I took from yours that was actually quite interesting, because yeah, I think you come across it a lot, and actually it comes down to something quite basic that they want. So I'm going to move on to, there was another point that I was going to make and now I can't remember, so I'm going to move on. So the last group was Ava, Claudia. Apologies.
Good morning.
That's okay.
Oh, hi Sharon.
Yes, our group, we talked about looking at the age of the young person and the type of risky behavior to kind of determine where to really turn to. If the child, if it's a young person, a really young person, we talked about maybe informing the parents, getting the parents involved in whatever the situation is, and possibly, and we talked about that sometimes parents themselves may have challenges dealing with their child's behavior. So maybe to get some training for the parents in how to work with their child in that situation or dealing with that behavior. We also looked at getting other professionals to assist if it is necessary, counselors, maybe social worker, maybe even the police, depending again on the type of behavior and the age of the young person. And then because we looked at isolation, that maybe these risky behaviors are a result of feeling isolated, maybe to have some kind of session, maybe once per week through Zoom or something like that, where young people could get together and just talk. And just talk about what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what their concerns are, and just have somebody there who can guide the session and give them that support. And they will be supporting each other as well as they share and, you know, communicate. And maybe that may help with the feelings of isolation as well.
Brilliant, some good points there too. I just want to highlight, when you're talking about training parents, there are a few youth organisations who do put on training for parents in the UK, and I think it's actually really something really good, because I think with youth work, parents can learn sort of more informal skills rather than authoritative skills, which they might learn from elsewhere. And for parents to understand adolescence and that type of development that young person's going through, I think there's a lot of negative stereotypes that get labelled on young people. So it's really good for parents to really understand what sort of growth and development's happening with their young person. And then also you were saying about just a space for young people to talk. And obviously with isolation and lockdown, people can't meet up as much as they'd want to, or in the same spaces that they might want to. So like you said, putting on some sort of digital Zoom call, or even a physical distancing park where they can sort of sit near each other but not quite next to each other, as it were, and setting up that safe space to talk would be really beneficial for a lot of young people right now. So yeah, that's all our groups, and I might try and hand back to Laura a little bit now as well, if that's all right, Laura.
Yeah, I'm back in the Zoom call now. My internet failed me slightly there, so apologies for that. We're going to move on to the next slide.
Can you see it?
Yep, I can see it now. So what this is about is your support. So being a youth worker, working with young people, you're there for those young people, but it's really, really important that you have the right support in place, because this is going to make you a better youth worker. It's going to make you better at your job. And also having those structures in place also lend itself well to youth work becoming more professional. So in terms of the support that is essential, first of all, a debrief. So after you've worked with young people, after the session, after the activity, it is really, really important to debrief with your team. So this isn't just about evaluating how well the session went, it's also about taking time to reflect on your feelings about how that session went. And it's good to be able to connect with your colleagues immediately afterwards to kind of offload on one another how you're feeling about what happened, and also being able to action plan for the next session and any particular issues that came up for young people. Now, the second thing that's really important is to have regular supervisions. So supervisions are a one-to-one meeting with your line manager or someone that is more senior than you, and these are regular. And these aren't just about the business, so what your targets are and are you doing everything you're meant to be doing. It's also an opportunity to use this to reflect with your manager. So your manager would usually be someone that is more experienced than you, and they'll be able to help you come to conclusions about your practice and point you in the right direction to new thinking and new skills and new techniques. And it's a conversation that you have, but it's on a regular basis, and it's about your development as a youth worker. And then peer support. So another thing that's really important away from your actual practice is to be able to have the opportunity to speak with your colleagues on a regular basis to share good practice. So we can have all these amazing ideas and do some really good work, but we might come across a stumbling block, and being able to talk with our colleagues who may have come across this before and had a fantastic outcome, we can share that good practice. So it's a way of sharing good ideas and things that are working. So when I was talking about reflective practice, this is a model that is often used in reflective practice. So it's a cycle. So it basically continues throughout everything that you do. So it starts off with a concrete experience. So the doing, so this could be your interaction with the young person. And then reflective observation. So thinking about what happened afterwards, thinking about the experience, thinking about that interaction. And then abstract conceptualization. So that is actually making conclusions from your observation of how you interacted with that young person, coming up with things that you want to think about. And then we have active experimentation. So this is about putting in place those new ideas you had from the reflection and from the abstract conceptualization. And this goes around in a cycle and it continues. So it's about having the experience, thinking about it, thinking of new ideas of how to improve on that, and then actually putting that into practice. So this is a really important model that you can use in your supervisions with your line manager, or if you're just reflecting on your own.
So now we're going to do another poll. So it's all about, hopefully, what changes you might make going forward. So it's sort of reflecting on the stuff that we've been discussing, and it's going to be looking at either changes to your own wellbeing and your practice, and that will benefit you, and it also changes to the organisation to support your team. So it's multiple choice. You can choose none of the above, but I'm hoping that none of you will choose it. But you know what? Be honest. Choose it if you want to. So yeah, what changes will you make to your well-being and your practice, and also what changes or suggestions will you make to your organisation? We're going to discuss some afterwards. So voting is on the screen. Multiple choice, I believe, again. Okay, so 80% voted, and hopefully you'll see the results on the screen. So majority of you said you'll make suggestions to the organisation for supporting the team. I think that's really good, because I think even at MYA we sometimes forget about doing supervisions, we forget about debriefing and supporting each other because there's so much work going on. It's the type of thing that gets put off a little bit, but it is very good practice to keep it in there and make sure that you protect that time. And also changes to your well-being when you're busy, when you're trying to be flexible and things change because of things like COVID-19. It's really easy to forget about your own well-being and your own practice. So it's great that some of you also voted for that. So I'm going to stop sharing that on the screen, and hopefully my slide will appear.
Yep, so I'm going to introduce our final discussion today. So we actually want you to verbalise those ideas you have about what you're going to change. We are going to split you into groups, and we're going to have groups 1 to 3. So groups 1, 2 and 3, focusing on the first question, which is the changes to daily working life to benefit wellbeing and practice. That's what we want you to focus on. And if you're in group 4 or 5, we want you to focus on suggestions to the organisation for supporting the team. And then when we come back, we're going to ask each group to feedback one thing that they discussed, one item.
Your workload and the workload of others, even though they may be overlapping, learn to say no and learn to set boundaries, and do not feel bad about it. And I repeat, do not feel bad about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think that is really, really important, having professional boundaries. And I think also about being a professional is about knowing your purpose. What is your role as a youth worker? You can't be there for everything. And also stretching yourself too thinly means that you're not giving your best to the young people. So it's really, you have to be really clear about your purpose and your role. And like you said, having professional boundaries and learning to say no. I think that's quite hard for us as youth workers, saying no. But thank you very much. Group 4, would somebody like to share what you discussed? 1 point, please. Room 4 were Claudine, Ezekiel, Giselle, Kenya, Salisha.
All right. Well, in group 4, I think our question was suggestions for the organizations, basically,
Yep.
on how to support the team. So one of the points that was raised that is having the organization provide an opportunity for debriefing, because having to go through the different communities, deal with different young people issues and so on, it will eventually take a toll on you. And if you don't debrief, find ways to ease the stress, you too will become stressed and you will not be performing at your best. Also suggested training. They're moving from interactive situation where you are one-on-one with your clients, now having to deal with a situation where you have to distance yourself, having to use software and other mediums. You may not be so technologically inclined, so that, I mean, your organization should provide the opportunity so that you would be able to get some sort of training in using different software that would enable you to communicate with your young people. And the third one was protocols. Right, the organization should also ensure that they establish certain protocols in terms of how you deal with sanitation, what youth officers should and shouldn't do in terms of contact with their clients, where they can and cannot go, have information readily available, what are the procedures to access certain things. All this should be clear, so there is no confusion later on down the road. All right, I think that's it.
Thank you very much. I think it's really interesting you mentioned protocols, because we need to have clear processes and procedures in place to direct us to know what we can do and what we can't do, because we don't want to be breaking the law. We don't want to be going against what the organisational policy is, especially when things are changing regularly. And I think it's important that if we are unclear, that we are raising that with our managers, so the organisation can put out a organisation-wide policy to advise their staff and advise youth workers on what they should be doing in this current climate. So that is really important. Thank you. Breakout room 5.
Okay, Kesley here. We would have some of the stuff that has been said before by my colleague, we would have also shared it as well. Additionally, we decided that we should develop, the organization should help in the development of creative ways of engaging youth, getting them actively involved in the sessions instead of making it a sit and listen exercise. So having fun icebreakers, to help the young people become more engaged and involved in the activity and the exercise. The organization should help in the creation of these things because, as was stated before, we know that young people have very short attention spans. So you have to always have them engaged and actively involved. That's about it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, one of the key principles of youth work is about empowerment and engagement and participation, and ensuring that young people are at the very start of the planning process and their voice is heard. So that is really important. Thank you everyone for contributing to that. We're now going to move on to the very last section. So this is a Q&A section. If you do have a question, what we'd like you to do is raise your hand, and then you'll be invited to unmute yourself, ask your question, and then we'll answer it. If you don't want to speak, you are free to ask that question into the group chat and we will answer it that way. What you'll see in the chat right now is a link for everybody to complete a feedback survey. So I invite you all to click on that once we've had our Q&A, which is really important. It lets us know how you feel this session has gone. So please complete the feedback survey. But first, if anyone does have a question, if you want to use the raise your hand function on Zoom or type your question into the chat. Anyone with a question? I think first of all, what I would like to do, if nobody has a question at this moment, is to say actually some of the issues that you brought up are really important about speaking to your organisation about being able to debrief. Often when we work as a team of youth workers with young people, it's quite natural to come together at the end of the session. When you work one-to-one with young people, you often don't have that opportunity to offload and talk about and reflect with another practitioner. So organising that with your organisations, asking for those group meetings, group supervisions or peer support is a really valuable tool for youth workers, and it certainly does help in terms of being professional and improving your practice. Anybody with a question? Or a statement or comment?
I have a question, if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so given the fact that we're working with young people and that young people have a tendency to like to, be engaged on a physical level, now that this COVID-19 situation has, the pandemic has affected the entire world, how can we still maintain or have that same sort of energy that we would normally have when we're engaging these young people on a physical level? How can we now translate or transition that into the online platform?
I'm going to hand that to Lydia because I know Lydia's done quite a lot of digital youth work recently.
I'll try and answer that. So Kesley, sorry, it's very difficult. As you said, it's a very different environment being online compared to being in the same room as someone. I think making it as interactive as possible. So we've done a few polls on here and we've done a few breakout rooms, but even inviting more media into this. So a game, I don't know if you've heard of Kahoot quizzes. Game of I don't know if you know Pictionary, so someone draws a picture and you have to guess what they're drawing. That could be done on the whiteboard. It's just flashed up that my internet connection is unstable, so if no one can hear me very well, let me know, but hopefully you got all that. Oh good. But But yeah, and even asking the young people themselves what they want to engage in online. So you could give them those options, but asking them to plan a digital session could invite some really interesting ideas. Obviously, you can monitor that. So if there's anything that goes against safeguarding, you'd be able to say, no, that's not possible. But sometimes young people know more digital tools than we do, and it's okay to accept that as well. So yeah, asking them what they want, but trying to think outside the box a little bit on things that you can bring to an online meeting helps as well. I hope that sort of helped.
It does. Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
So in terms of the size of the meeting space, how many young persons would you suggest having in an online meeting at a given time? Because you don't want it to be too big where it's out of control and you can't get everybody's attention, or you want it too small. So what would be the ideal size?
Sure. I actually like smaller numbers when it comes to digital groups. Sort of like what you were saying around, if there's too many people, then there's too much interaction going on. But breakout rooms can help with that. So the same way we have done here, they could go into breakout rooms. But something that I would stress with young people is that you have practitioners on the call with you. So there can be one practitioner per breakout room, just because of the safeguarding aspects and being able to monitor what conversations are going on in there. So yeah, if there's a really large group, split it down into smaller breakout rooms. Also, what I would advise is if you've got a large age range, so say you've got young people you're working with from ages 13 to 24, make sure that you have different groups. So it might be say 13 to 15-year-olds in one group, could be 16 to 18-year-olds in another, and 18 plus in another, just thinking about age appropriateness as well. And in small groups, I always ask quite in-depth questions, because then you can have a discussion in a small group and get everyone to feedback, and that can just stay in that one room. I hope that helps. Hopefully.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Jessel, did you have a question?
The question I wanted to ask, with all of the discussion that we had this morning, from your standpoint, because we share different, not nationality, but I want to say demographic or culture, what difference had it been for you in working with youth within that trying time or within the pandemic?
And is that a question for the whole group? Because I know that some people are based in different countries than others. Or would you like it from our perspective first, and then maybe we can ask other people?
I wanted it from you all, because most of us within the Caribbean, based on our discussion, had shared similar issues or challenges. So I just want it from the NYA. Thank you.
Oh, cool. No worries. Do you want me to go first, Laura? Yeah. So I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe there's been a higher number of cases in the UK compared to any of the East Caribbean countries. And we were in strict lockdown since March. However, parts of the country have opened up a bit more since June. Our headquarters is actually based in a place called Leicester, which has been in strict lockdown and still is, because they've had quite a high number of cases. So we're finding that we now have localized restrictions. So certain cities go into strict lockdown, but others are sort of freer, you could say. So schools did manage to open up, but now schools have gone into summer holidays. So Laura has her kids at home, even though she's trying to work from home as well, which has been quite a strain on a lot of parents, I think. We've had restaurant industry is starting to open up again, as well as pubs. And supermarkets have always been open. Shops are now opening again. But for young people, because youth services are closed down and community centres and youth centres haven't been able to open up, there haven't been any place for them to go. Now, the UK did go through a lot of budget cuts in terms of youth centres. The government did cut our budget quite a lot. So a lot of services did close down before lockdown. However, now it's even worse because lockdown closed even more places that could have been open. So for young people, they haven't had anywhere to go. With reduced school, they've then been even more isolation because they've been stuck at home and without being able to see their friends. So slowly but surely, the different social connections have lowered. And I think from my perspective, mental illness is increasing and will increase even past lockdown because it'll be the effects of it. Social isolation has been huge. And also youth employment. So we're already seeing a vast drop in the number of young people in employment because generally young people are in 0-hour contracts or temporary contracts. So they are losing their jobs or being made redundant. So there is going to be an increase in youth unemployment as well. So not so great really for young people right now. Laura, did you want to add to anything around that?
Yeah, I was just going to add that what we're seeing is that as services are slowly starting to open up, as the restrictions are being slowly lifted, what's happening is that those services are focusing on targeted young people, so the high need young people, at-risk young people that have got multiple issues, and young people that would usually access universal services, so youth centres for sports and leisure activities and engagement and socialisation. They actually don't have anything accessible to them at the moment. And this is largely due to the fact that the way those services are having to be run, social distancing, limiting numbers, and also we have to understand that the workforce has been reduced as well, where people have been furloughed and people are not at work yet because services haven't resumed as usual. So there has been a huge impact. And as Lydia said, mental health has been a huge issue for young people, as has criminal exploitation, things called county lines. So, and also what young people have been able to access online with very little supervision, because although they've been at home, parents have been working and not with them. So they're in the house with them, but they're not with them.
Would anyone else like to comment on where they're from and the differences that they've experienced with their youth services? I know it's a bit different everywhere. I guess something to add to Laura's comment actually of gang exploitation. So because the most vulnerable people have been out on the streets, probably because they don't want to be at home with their parents anymore. They have been targeted and the gangs have sort of adapted their techniques in targeting people. So Laura was saying as well as being on streets, but also online. So people can be targeted online quicker and easier because they are generally online for longer periods of time. And that risk has gone up. And like Laura was saying, because those services have either been cut or people aren't working, there's no one really there to protect them when there would be in sort of like a normal time. Yeah.
Does anyone else have another question before we close the webinar? Okay, so thank you everybody for attending. Oh, we have, okay, you got in there just the last second. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, it's not really pertaining to what we discussed today. I just wanted to know when would the next webinar be. I was put into a group and then I got that email yesterday telling me that we have a session today, so I just joined in. So I kind of want to know ahead of time so I could prepare.
Okay, I think that Amina may be able to help advise when the next session.
That depends. What's your name? And then we'll make sure you get the information by tomorrow. So if I can have your name, because I don't have the list with, and the date.
Ezekiel Alexander.
Alexander. We'll contact you offline, Alexander, and I'll check.
Okay.
when the
Thank you.
notifications were sent to make sure you know in advance. So I'll check that again. Huh? So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Okay, so thank you everyone. Thank you for taking part. Everyone has contributed really well to this, and it's actually been a really interesting webinar, so thank you very much.
Thank you as well.
Thank you, guys.
Great session, everyone. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a lovely day, everybody.
Have a good day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Goodbye.
Make sure you click on the link for the survey. Thank you very much.